If you ever wake up with blood on your hands in the middle of the Appalachians, the first thing you'll do is lie very still and hope it's a dream. That's what I tried. I kept my eyes shut and listened, really listened, for the obvious sounds, the crackle of the fire, the whisper of wind through the pines, the occasional far-off call of an owl. Instead, there was a silence so complete it felt like pressure in my ears, and the only proof I had that I was still myself was the warm, sticky weight between my fingers. I remember the night before in fragments, cold beer fizzing against my lips, the orange halo of the campfire painting the tent in grotesque moving shadows, and the way the smoke smelled like a memory I couldn't place. We had parked just off a muddy logging road, 2 cars, 2 friends, a map that stopped being useful once the GPS died. The Appalachians at night are a velvet dark. You think trees simply stand, but they breathe, they shift, and their exhalations collect like wet wool around your face. When I opened my eyes, the sky above the trees had lost its stars. The fire that had been a perfect living coin was a little heap of coals, sputtering as if someone had breathlessly walked away. My hands were not mine. They were knotted with veins, smeared with something that glinted like old rust in the coal's weak light. I sat up so slowly my spine protested, feeling the cool, damp earth on my lower back and a thin, persistent ache along my palms, as if someone had pressed a hot iron into them and then forgotten to take it away. At first, I thought the others were still inside the tent, asleep. Then I realized the tent was zipped open. The canvas fluttered slightly, like a tongue tasting the night, and inside there was only a sleeping bag with an imprint, an absence shaped like a person. No boots, no packs, no whispered curses or laughter. Nothing but the faint smell of cedar and a metallic tang in the air that made my stomach twist. I called out, my voice thin and cracked. No answer. The forest didn't reply, but something else did. A dragging sound, delicate as fingernails on dry leaves, coming from farther down the ridge. It wasn't animal. Animals make quick, honest noises. This was a slow, deliberate scraping, and it made the hair on my arms prick up like tiny wires. My phone was dead. My lighter clicked, but produced only a tiny sigh. The fire, when I fed it a scrap of wood, swallowed the flame and then spat ash in shapes that looked an awful lot like hands. I don't know how long I sat there watching my palms, time folded around the flames, a memory pressing into me and then pulling away. The thing that made my chest tighten the most wasn't the blood or the quiet. It was the whisper I thought I heard behind me, so close it brushed the shell of my ear. But when I turned, there was nothing but the dense dark and the suggestion of footprints leading away, deeper into the woods. I followed the footprints because not following felt like admitting defeat. The trees closed behind me like a curtain. Each step took me deeper into a cold that seemed to come from inside my bones, the kind of cold that makes your teeth ache and your hands go numb even when the rest of you is sweating. The smell changed, not just cedar and damp earth anymore, but a sharp metallic scent that burned the back of my throat. It tasted of old pennies and rain on iron. The dragging sound grew closer and then farther, as if something were learning my tempo and then teasing me for slowing. Sometimes I would stop and hold my breath, and the world would do the strangest thing. It would rearrange itself. A snapped twig would be exactly where I remembered it, but the pattern of fallen leaves would form a path that led in circles until I felt dizzy, like the woods had folded inward around me. I found things that didn't belong. One of Ethan's gloves, turned inside out and stuffed with moss. Claire's headlamp, its strap coiled like a sleeping snake, the glass face smeared with a brown shadow. I could tell where they'd been by the small details. Claire's lighter always clicked twice, not once, and the lighter in my hand clicked 3 times. My throat closed on a laugh that sounded wrong in my ears. There were moments when the forest imitated memory with cruel fidelity. I heard Claire humming one of those stupid radio songs she loved, the kind that used to make us laugh, and I walked toward it with my chest open, the way you walk towards someone who's coming home. I rounded a trunk and there was no Claire, only the echo of that tune stretched thin, warped into something like a sigh. At some point I realized the humming had turned into my own voice, calling names I hadn't said aloud. That's when the first real panic set in, the idea that the sound could come from inside me. I stumbled across a ring of stones slick with ash, and in the middle lay a Polaroid face down. I knew without picking it up that I shouldn't, and then my fingers, those hands I kept examining like foreign objects, pried it up anyway. The picture was of my own face, eyes wide and wet, and my hands, bright and raw, cupped around something that could have been a beat of the heart. On the back, someone had scrawled, in a hand I thought was mine, "You shouldn't have woken us." When I turned to run, the world snapped. The trees blurred, the air hummed, and I was suddenly back where I started. Only the campfire was larger, a leaking orange, and the tent flap was closed. My breath came out in short, terrified bursts. From inside the tent I heard breathing that was not my own, and then, unmistakably, my voice close to my ear whispering, "Don't go." I spun, nothing but canvas. The breath against my neck was cold. I shouldn't have gone back to the tent. Every sensible part of me screamed to stay where I was, to plant myself by the dying coals until morning peeled the dark away, but something older and more foolish led me, an itch under the skin, a need to close the loop. The path back felt both wrong and inevitable, like walking a familiar street that has been rearranged while you blink. The air was sticky now, thick as stew, and each breath tasted of iron and damp wool. The campfire had swollen into a hungry eye, its light licking the canvas until the tent glowed like a wound. I reached the flap, and the zipper protested as if waking from a long sleep. My hands, those traitorous hands, trembled, not from cold, but from a hunger I couldn't name. I pushed the flap aside and peered in. At first, everything looked normal. The sleeping bags, the scattered gear, the small crater of ash where we'd thrown a half-burnt log. Then I saw them, two bodies curled like rag dolls at the lip of the bag, faces pale as the moon, lips parted, as if mid-conversation. Ethan's jaw was slack. Claire's fingers were curled into tiny claws. Their eyes, though, were wrong, glossy, reflecting the fire like pools of oil. When I stepped closer, their mouths moved, forming shapes I couldn't hear. The tent swallowed their whispers. Something moved behind the sleeping bag. I felt it before I saw it, a pressure at the base of my skull, like someone leaning their full weight against the back of my head. My throat clenched. I turned and found, impossibly, a mirror propped against the gearbox, its surface blacked with soot. In it, I saw myself, my face drawn thin, my hair plastered to my scalp, my hands cupped up and dripping. But my reflection wasn't mimicking me. It held its palms out to the sleeping bodies, and in its mouth was a small, pulsing thing that beat with a soft, terrible rhythm. I stumbled back, and the mirror tipped. The glass flashed, and for a second the image scrambled into a dozen fragments. My face, their faces, the trees, hands reaching. When the mirror settled, the thing was standing in the tent behind me, shadow pale and too tall. It moved with the slow certainty of something that has practiced patience for a very long time. It didn't walk, it unfolded. I could hear the faint tearing of fabric, my skin, and when it stepped closer, the smell hit me. Not just copper, but the warm stink of something freshly opened. My knees gave out. It didn't need to speak. It pressed its face into mine, and I tasted my own fear. Salty, metallic, bright. There was a memory then, sudden and foul, of all the small betrayals. The way I ignored the map, the way I laughed at Claire's jokes, the way I reached for the lighter and clicked an extra time. It wasn't them who had left, I realized with a cold, clean clarity. It was me. Or rather, I had left something behind, and now it wanted in. I tried to run, but the forest had already learned the shape of my stride. My feet dragged as if through mud. Behind me, the creature's footsteps matched mine, a soft thudding that had become a promise. The last sound I heard before the dark closed in properly was a whisper that was both my voice and not. "Thank you for finding us." I wiped the blood from my hands, and the forest laughed.
Subscribe to Horror Story Bar.